Entrepreneur MBA podcast purpose is to help existing business owners grow their companies past the 10 million in revenue per year benchmark. Here is your host, Stephen Halasnik.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Halasnik, and I'm co-founder of Financing Solutions. Financing Solutions provides easy to set up lines of credit for small businesses, and I will be your host for today's Entrepreneur MBA podcast. If you are interested in learning more about a line of credit for your small business, which I highly recommend, not just because I work for the company or own the company, but also because I've had them for over 25 years myself, please visit fscreditline.com. Again, that's FS as in Financing Solutions, creditline.com. Over the last 25 plus years, I have built 6 companies in the $5 million to $25 million range, including 2 companies on the Inc. 500 fastest growing companies in the United States. I love learning from people with business experience. And today I'm excited to be speaking with Leila Ansart from Leadership Impact Strategies. Leila, as a certified executive coach, has 13 plus years of experience advising business leaders on how to increase profitability and ease in their companies by removing friction in and between their employees. According to research, the direct manager accounts for 70% of the variance in an employee's engagement and retention. Leila works with
Leila.
Works directly with business owners to connect the dots on where the friction stems from and how to address it in an effective and affirming way. This results in her clients' significant improvement in profitability, as well as a greater sense of ease in their role as a business owner. Leila, welcome to the Entrepreneur MBA podcast.
Thank you so much, Stephen.
So today's topic, how to increase profitability and remove friction within your teams. Something that I do have really, unfortunately, a lot of experience in creating friction. When I first started my couple of businesses, I was a pretty bad manager, something I really had to work hard on getting. So I really realized how important this topic is. Tell me from your experience why there is either friction or why is it that business owners or managers are really bad at being good at their jobs?
Well, I'm going to kind of rephrase what I think you're saying there. I think that there's a lot of good intentions in today's managers and today's business owners. And I want to acknowledge that. Most individuals who have started a business, I've started a few businesses in my day. Most of us have kind of our big goal, and we're coming at that. We're coming at the work of launching a business and managing the people that are working for us with good intentions. We want to create impact. We want to create profit. We want to have, beyond most people, beyond employing ourselves, we want to create some kind of a financial future as well. I think where we get caught up, and I say we because I also manage people, and I think we're all human. So we all can get sucked into this. But I think where we get caught up is this gap between our intention and what actually comes out in the day to day when we're dealing with all the other factors that are required in order to build and manage a successful company. We're oftentimes moving from a place of high stress, with the market changes, with employee expectations and demands, with, inflation. We're recording this in October 2022, and there's all kinds of, fears and questions about what's coming down the pike. And I think quite often, once you hire people, you kind of just, as a manager and a business owner, just want them to just do the work already. Like, I hired you for X, go do X and do it well. I'll pay you. And we've got an agreement here, right? So I think that's what I find is that there's just this disconnect between the intention of the business owner or the manager and how they're actually showing up due to all the other things that are tapping into their patience, their skill, and the way that they're interacting with their employees.
Yeah, you're so right. I'm a good manager now, but back when I was a terrible manager. If my job was only to manage people, I'd be good at it. But throw in,
Mhm.
I got to worry about customers. I got to worry about money flowing through the business. I have to worry about, hiring my the next people. It's you throw multiple things in there, and unfortunately, management goes on the wayside. And that's why when,
Yeah.
I was trying to get to a point with, I remember my second business, let's talk about it. We were growing really, really fast. And, I was trying everything I could to hire a second in command, to have a second, be able to afford
Mhm.
somebody who could take over the management role. Cause I knew I wasn't that good at it. So, when people are coming to you, is it usually because they see improvements that need to be made in an area of management or friction, or do they come to you with the purpose of creating more growth, and you help them understand that there's some issues going on as far as management or conflicts going on?
Yeah, I think to answer that question, it's really both. But I think the main thing is that um, when when individuals come across a conversation with me, whether I'm speaking at an event or they're hearing me on a podcast like this, I think sometimes a little light bulb goes on. And I don't mean to sound like people haven't thought of the friction between people as a real problem. It's just we sort of, again, with all of the other pressing priorities, we can sort of just push that off to the side. I hear so many managers and business owners say, oh, dealing with people, like it's my least favorite part of the job. And but I think sometimes we forget that you can do something about that. It's not just a big pain in the butt that you have to acknowledge and then leave over there on the side and hope that it doesn't stress you out too much this week. Um, so it's really about people, business owners and managers wanting to get better results, whether that's profitability, whether that's increasing or decreasing the timeline, from start to finish of a project. Whether it's, sometimes you've got two companies merging together, there's an acquisition, and the teams just are, they're butting heads. They can't seem to get along. They're doing things in their own ways. And so it's oftentimes sort of this oh my god, yeah, we can do something about this, and it's practical. It's not just learn to get along better. I mean, if we all learned that lesson easy, we'd know it by the time we were 10, 11, 12 years old, because most of us had probably a decent parents who tried to teach us that lesson. But it's really about taking a look at why the friction is there, and then understanding that there's something very specific that you can do to both understand yourself better and understand the others that you're working with, and find a middle road there. And I think that aha moment is what I find my clients again and again, like, look at me with this bright-eyed, eyebrows up expression, like, oh my god, that's why that person does that. And that aha moment releases the annoyance, the emotional hang, the weight of that person's just a jerk, or that person just annoys me. They do things so differently than I do. And it reframes it into a new language that helps you to see that that person's actually bringing a ton of value to the organization. They're just going about it in a totally different way than you are. And so that's the bridge that I find that I build a lot of times.
Yeah. So just so our listeners know, and I did say this in one other podcast, this is probably like a 200th podcast. So, when you do enough of these, you only have so many life experiences. They can repeat themselves, especially in business. But, so this one company I had was growing in leaps and bounds. It was on the Inc. 500, fastest growing. And um, the I was a new entrepreneur at the time, and I actually had to seek out a psychologist because I felt like I wasn't I didn't feel good about how I was treating my employees. So I went to see a psychologist, and she worked with me for 6 months, just like once a week, but maybe it wasn't even 6 months, but it was it was great. And so what I did at that time, I had made a commitment to saying, listen, I need to improve my skills, and because I felt like I was the one creating the conflict in the office, and I needed to be a better manager. And so, so I read books about it. I hired a psychologist. I had hired a business coach. I took Dale Carnegie courses, but Dale Carnegie's old school, but I took Dale Carnegie courses. I don't even know if they're around anymore. And I really worked hard at it. And I worked on improving not just myself, but our processes, our hiring, our something called a position results document, which is making sure that people understand what they're responsible for. And I became a good manager, not great, but good. And I felt better about myself too. So, I'm raising this to give you a real life example, our listeners, that this doesn't change overnight. You have to make a real commitment to it. By the way, it directly affected profits, right? It directly not only affected how I felt and how my employees felt and how turnover was, but also based on profits as well. So what do you have to say about that? What I just said, Leila? Leila, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's a hard name.
Yeah.
I applaud you because I think that self-awareness is key, and that can seem really basic, but in moments of really full schedules and huge responsibility lists, that can then get pushed down a bit on the priority scale. I think when it comes down to it, the way that we treat people and the way that the people that work for us feel in their organization, the humanity component of our teams, right? We're not just little robots that are all doing the things we're supposed to do to get the company to where it needs to go. We're people. And so as much as those that are a bit uncomfortable with emotions and the fluidity of that may wish that wasn't the case, we're all people. We're people as the leaders, and our people, our teams are people. So I know I'm saying that a lot, but I really feel strongly there's a humanity that really is coming back to the surface in terms of the type of leadership that's effective in today's age. I refer to it as empathetic or human-centered leadership. And it really comes back to saying, okay, who am I? What are my goals? And then who are these people that are working for me? And what are their goals? What do they want? And how can we create a bridge so that I get what I want out of these people and they get what they want out of this job, and we all win? And that may sound too good to be true, but I personally believe it's absolutely possible. There's a study last year in 2021 by Gallup. I'm going to actually read this quote. It says that today's employees want development, purpose, and in the moment feedback. In other words, they prefer coaching over bossing. Data also shows that well coached teams tend to considerably outperform less ably managed teams on engagement, retention, safety, productivity, and profitability metrics. So, saying that the result of you doing that work on yourself and putting intentionality around becoming a better manager led to better profitability, I absolutely agree with that. I think, it's pretty simple when you've got someone who's sitting at their desk, whether that's at home or in a physical building, and they're only so engaged, they're only so motivated. They don't want to lose their job, but they're certainly not going, to the full extent of their capability. You're obviously going to get less productivity from that person. You're going to get less creativity, less innovative solutions. And when they're faced with their own version of what we're facing as the leaders, right? Annoying people, in quotes, out of quotes, right? The people that they don't particularly like to work with, the people that are different than them in terms of how they go about a project. They're not going to put that extra effort in either, because they are coming from a place of being less than engaged. So this is not a new problem. The leaders that are listening to your podcast know this. This is not, brain science here. But my point is, I think that there's much more within our ability to change than I think some people realize. And given the environment that we see in today's world, I mean, there's a potential incoming recession. There's changing workforce expectations. There's this still battle between back to work or not back to work, depending on the field you're in and how physical the work is that your company does. There's all of these different changing things, and so being able to take a step back and say, what can we improve in terms of what our teams are producing? And is there a way to address that right now? I think is a really timely question to have for today's leaders.
How have you seen things since you've been a coach and a consultant with the introduction of Zoom and video conferencing and those type of areas? How has the area of conflict changed?
Well, it's certainly not gone away. I think with so many people working virtually, even if it's some of the time and not all the time, it's actually increased. Conflict has increased, in my opinion, because when you have conflict in the first place, if you are face to face with each other, there are certain sort of forced interactions that happen, and it can offer times to try to resolve that conflict. When you're on Zoom, people are just going to turn their video off. They're going to pay half attention. They're going to have either legitimate or illegitimate excuses why they're not getting back to the person that they're in conflict with. So it's just given people more of an easy way to sort of not deal with conflict. And conflict's not bad. All conflict is not bad. In fact, there's a lot of science that says that from conflict comes great innovation. It's part of what causes us to think differently. It's part of what causes a different part of our brain to engage. So it's not that we're trying to avoid conflict altogether, but when it's impacting the company in a way where it's pulling back from deadlines, where it's inhibiting people who need to work together to do that in an efficient way, then obviously it's a problem. But I do think with, as you said, the virtual environment, the sort of new world that we find ourselves in, it only increases the possibility for that conflict to not be resolved in a healthy way.
Is there any research that shows that when employees work virtually, I know it's a little off topic, but are there actually less meetings than there used to be?
No.
Oh.
No, unfortunately, there are some outlying companies that have made some very intentional policies around that. In fact, last year there were several pretty large companies, Citibank, I believe Meta did it as well, and several other big companies who designated certain days as no meeting days just to allow their staff to spend more time kind of in focused work. But for the most part, no, the virtual environment has only increased the meetings. And that's, again, something that, in my opinion, could really be looked at. I mean, something as simple as taking a standard 60-minute meeting, like that's just what your calendar automatically populates, and changing it to 45 minutes to give people a buffer between the back-to-back days that they have is a very actionable tool that or tactic that can help to eliminate a little bit of that pressure. But yeah, no, it hasn't decreased, unfortunately.
Yeah, because I run a very, very small company now, so we don't really have Zoom meetings because we're small, so we don't really need to do that. But I think it's fascinating to see, the Zoom meeting culture versus the old school culture that I was kind of building companies in. Where do you see? The other thing about that I'll say about conflict and profitability, and I hit it from very different angles when I was really trying to improve in that area. One was to improve myself, but the other one was to hit it from, and I've seen this because I know so many business owners. I'm lucky enough to know a ton. And I've mentioned this before. I was part of entrepreneurial organization, and my entrepreneurial organization forum group of 9 guys have been together for 25 years, where we meet every month. And so not only did I grow up building businesses, but so did the 8 other guys in my group. And what you saw is people who are very successful at building companies, multiple companies, right? Uh, we all really improved in building really solid processes and procedures, and like we grew companies when we got more experience so much better, because we knew, okay, we have to have, when we hire people, they have to know exactly what they're responsible for. They have to know how they're being measured. They have to know when they're getting performance reviews. It's all formalized. And when I saw that I did that, or the people that I'm great friends with did that, uh, it really helped improve employee morale, a whole bunch of other factors, which then, of course, also improved profitability. Has that been your experience as well?
Yes, I would agree with you. And I think the difference here in how sometimes when people hear like this topic of reducing conflict or communication, they sort of think of it like in an isolated bucket. Okay, let's, I could see my company needs that. Let's do a training, let's do a workshop. And I do those, that is a part of my business. But I think the real beauty comes when you view the business in a more holistic way. And that's the benefit of working with, like you have trusted advisors in your, I believe you called it a CEO group. That's something that I do for companies. They view me as a trusted advisor to be able to say, let's talk about, the friction points that you're experiencing. And then let me kind of dig into that with you. Let's talk about how that relates to these other 4 or 5 topics to see where the connection points are. Because coming in with just one offering is typically not going to solve, your $200,000 problem. You're not going to solve that with one workshop. And so being able to access some kind of a trusted advisory individual or circle as you have is a beautiful way to do that and make sure that you are looking at the performance reviews, the one-on-ones, not just, these smaller or larger issues around, customer retention and client acquisition and all those different things. So bringing it all together is absolutely the better and more effective way to go to impact your bottom line.
I know you'd be just guessing at this, but from your experience, what percentage of the time for a company that is in conflict, has conflict issues, like major conflict issues, is it stemming from the leader? So the leaders like when you do the research, someone comes to
Mm-hmm.
you and says, "Hey, we have lots of fights going on in our company, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's always issues. There's lots of turnover of lots of, and you do your research and you have your instincts, and you're like, what percentage of the time is it from the leader?"
I would say a very high percentage. I would say, 80 to 90%. Again, as you mentioned, I am guessing here. This is not
Yeah,
research. This
yeah,
is
yeah.
based on my experience. However, let me clarify when you say coming from the leader. The leader is the person who, this is obviously the owner operator. If it's not the owner, it's the main, like in person functional leader. They are the person who sets the whole theme, that who sets mission and vision, who talks about what kind of behaviors are actually tolerated and rewarded within the company. So even if, let's say, a manager 3 levels down is the main issue in terms of how a lot of the friction is happening, it's being allowed by the top leader, by the CEO. And for that reason, I do think it comes from the leader. Now, if the CEO also is providing a lot of that friction due to their leadership style, their communication style, or decision making style, then obviously that is going to cascade down as well. But there's such a huge responsibility on the leader of the organization and the leader of each individual team when you look at it that way too. Whatever it is that you do, what you live out in front of your people is what will be cascaded down throughout your organization. So you have the power and the responsibility, in my opinion, to make sure that your behaviors are in alignment with the values and the type of culture that you want to create. And knowing that you have, I mean, to me, that's such an opportunity. Like it's such an opportunity to create, yes, the profitability and the bottom line numbers that you want for your business, but also to create an environment where people feel engaged and like they're doing meaningful work. Like what they do for those 8 hours plus a day makes a stinking difference. I mean, that to me is exciting. It's an opportunity to take something that could be wah wah and make it woohoo,
Yeah.
That's a very scientific way of saying that. But, it's a responsibility of that leader to make sure that they're living out an example um, that is something they'd like to see in the lower levels of their organization. And I'll give you a really practical example. In an organization, let's say you've got your sales team and you've got your really high performing sales individual, the sales rep. And let's say that individual gets crazy successes, crazy numbers, hits it out of the park every time, but is kind of a difficult individual. They might be perhaps really difficult in terms of how they communicate with others. They might be demanding or inflexible in their approach with the internal members of the team, but it's excused because this person is bringing in all of these numbers. So that is a perfect example of what behaviors are tolerated and even rewarded, and knowing that whatever those behaviors are, they are going to increase and they're going to continue. So that would be an example of, it's a responsibility of the leader to say, we need to either address this or find another solution here for this particular issue.
Yeah, and I'll address that head on because I have had experiences with that. So I don't know anybody who hasn't, but I just want to add my 2 cents to say I always remember going into lectures or going to conferences where we talked about that subject matter, and just I'll make this quick. The impression I always got was it has to be addressed, and you have to. I'll just make it extreme. Get rid of that person, right? There's always what I found as I got better was there's a middle way. There's a middle way to addressing keeping that person, putting some, you know, systems in place, becoming more professional as a manager so that I can keep that person and not also have them affect the conflict. Maybe eventually I might have to get rid of that person, but try to put some other things in place because we all know it's hard to find really talented people. So much so, like what I even tried to do, which I carried through for the rest of my life, is found a way to generate leads so that that one person didn't become the focal point of the company, and I was able to generate leads for everybody so that I didn't have to have somebody that good anymore. So, there's different ways of doing it. And there's something else I just want to mention too, Leila, that maybe, one of my favorite books, I love Malcolm Gladwell. He's a great author,
Yeah.
and he's just amazing storyteller. And he wrote this great book called Tipping Point.
Mm-hmm.
And in Tipping Point, he talks about the Beatles and that it's this concept of 10,000 hours, and that it takes 10,000 hours for you to become a professional really at something, really knowledgeable and professional about it. He talks about the Beatles and how they accelerated that by playing in concerts 6 days a week and, when they were younger in Germany. Well, what I've seen is that it takes 10,000 hours, or let's say 10 years, for you to become a good business owner. And part of becoming a business owner is being able to manage people well, and being able to be a leader, and being able to read income statements and balance sheets, and managing the financial part of banking and those type of things, and so on and so forth. And so, I mean, do you have a comment in regards to that?
Yeah, I think it all does come down to the leader of the organization. I mean, I agree with you. I think putting due weight and priority on your own development as an individual and how your own behaviors and style impacts your team is a great way to start. And you can do that through reading books, through attending events, doing roundtable type events where you're surrounding yourself with others that you respect who are developed in this way. And also through bringing on, a consultant, an executive coach, someone like that. And I know I'm a bit biased because I am that person, but there's just something really special about taking concepts that you're reading about or hearing about, and then going and applying them to your own situation and having someone in your corner to really pull out of you, well, how does this relate to me? How does, what is the application here in this specific situation? What do I need to be mindful of? How do, what an antenna do I need to put up to watch for? What of all the behaviors I could change, what would be the ones that are the most, give the most impact in the quickest way? I mean, those kinds of reflection activities that you often do. It's not the only thing you do, but you often do with someone like an executive coach, are so valuable in transforming who you are and the impact that you're making on your organization.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I had a executive coach for several years, and I remember one of why I brought her on, of course, was I said earlier. Well, for a couple of reasons, was I've up until the last 15 years, I never had a business partner, and so I needed
Mm.
somebody to talk these things through, and so part of it was to help me become a better manager, a better leader. Part of it was someone who I can talk to about problems that are going on and be able to uh, address them. Um, and she was with me for several years. And, I always say, you got to be kidding me. The money you spent for a business coach, you don't really think you're going to get that back out of your business. I mean, it's really not that big a deal. Um, I would say that over the years, there's a lot of business coaches out there, and it's
Mhm.
really important that you interview them, you select the right one, you hold them accountable. You make sure that they're good at what they do, because there's a lot of
Absolutely.
them out there. I'm sure you've seen the
Absolutely.
explosion of them as well.
Yeah, well, I think it's that's driven by a few different things. I think that one of the key things to that I make a decision on when I'm looking at taking on a client is there 5 to 10 times the ROI for this client? Is my impact to be able to come in as a consultant, as an executive coach, going to provide this business 5 to 10 times what they're paying me? And if that answer is yes, then that's one of the check boxes that says, okay, this may be a good fit. If it's got to be measurable, that's a huge piece of it. And I think, going back to what you were saying earlier about leaders taking on the ownership of this development and becoming better leaders. I think a big part that's really timely right now too is with the tight labor force that many organizations are facing. You're getting a lot of higher skilled individuals who are demanding a higher pay, and if your organization can't pay that, then one of the things that many organizations are doing are bringing on lower skilled people, but then investing in them in very specific ways. I'm sure you've heard of the upskilling, the reskilling that many organizations are spending time and money on right now. And the reason for that is because the world is changing so rapidly. Worker expectations are changing so rapidly. Probably what you need your team to do is changing so rapidly. Why not bring on someone that is within your talent budget, but then offer the specific skills, training on those specific skills that will allow them to be more versatile in your organization. Skills like leadership, skills like communication, and understanding how to work with people who aren't exactly like them in terms of how they show up, how they communicate, how they make decisions. So I think it goes back to the earlier idea of the CEO and what falls on them for results, and then how that cascades down to the rest of the organization.
Yeah, the thing I learned too is like there's really, especially in a smaller company, there's really three levels. There's the leader, there is the manager, and then there's the worker bee. And there's no disrespect to any of those positions. Uh, it's very 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 hard for the leader to go and do all the other two.
Mm.
So, if you're going to go be a manager and be a worker bee, this podcast is geared toward businesses that are under $10 million in sales. Uh, so you can't do it all. It just can't.
Right.
And so, at some point in revenue, you got to bite the bullet and bring on some managers or a manager, and
Right.
that made a big difference to me. I mean, I at one point I couldn't afford to pay a manager to be a second in command. So one of the things I did that was unique, which I hadn't heard before, is I made somebody uh, a dual. I gave them a dual job, which was
Mm.
they were they were one of my better employees. They're really good with people, and I gave them a dual role. I paid them an extra $20,000 or $30,000 to be both the second in command and to continue doing their job, and it worked out great. She was with me for 18 years.
Mm.
So, and she developed into that position. She was 23 when I hired her. She loved the opportunity. Her and I got along great. It was, she actually worked for me for two different companies that I owned. So, it's great. So, any last thoughts at all, Leila, about what today's topic was, which about building profitability and reducing conflict?
Yeah, I would just encourage your listeners, again, going back to how much you have on your plate already, how many things are vying for your time. This is not an issue that's ever going to go away. And so, a little bit of an awareness call on you can't just keep pushing this off and think that your results are going to improve. When it comes to friction within teams and how that impacts your bottom line, it's only going to either stay stagnant or get worse. So if your goal right now, if your playbook is just I'll deal with this later, I highly encourage you to take a different approach and to think, what could I do today? And maybe you don't know that and you need to reach out for some clarity, from someone who does this kind of work. But what could I do today to make an impact, even if it's a small impact based on the time and resources I have available right now? But this is something you don't want to leave to chance, and you certainly don't want to leave it just hanging out there hoping it gets better.
Yeah, and I'll echo your comment too as well, and by saying it's amazing over 25 plus years of me building businesses, it really doesn't it really doesn't change. In other
Mhm.
words, is the basics of fundamentals of building a business is the same today as it was 25 years ago. We think, oh, it's changed so much. We got Zoom, we got this, we got that, we got this technology, we got industries change, we got recessions, we got inflation. It's it's always been there. So it's just,
Yeah.
learn these fundamentals and being able to manage your employees and reduce turnover and create a great company for people to work at. That hasn't
Yeah.
changed, and
Yeah.
it's critical. So, well, it was a great podcast. I knew it was going to be. I'd like to thank so very much Leila Ansart from Leadership Impact Strategies for coming on today's podcast. If you like today's podcast, please feel free to share it with a friend and also subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. And also, if you like today's podcast or any of the other one in the past, please give us a review. It really helps us get the word out. And of course, if you're looking for a line of credit for your business, you can call us at 862-207-4118 or visit our website at fscreditline.com. That's FS as a financing solutions, creditline.com. Leila, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, my website is leadershipimpactstrategies.com. I have some free resources on there that they can check out and get some ideas right from the get go. Or they're welcome to reach out to me through LinkedIn. And my name is spelled, I'm laughing because I was going to say just Leila Ansart, but no, that'll be too hard. So it's Leila. Last name is Ans, as in Sam, Art. But I have a big presence on LinkedIn as well. So either way is great. Would love to hear from your listeners.
Yeah, and so I think my big takeaway today. It's something that I was just kind of born with, but Leila, reminding me of it often. You have to invest in yourself. You have to invest in yourself, and today's awareness should be that we got from today's podcast from Leila was, you got to create a place where people want to work. It's just part of it.
Mm.
And that helps reduce conflicts and improves profitability. It's a simple formula, really. So, on top of that, I always say this, make sure you take good care of yourself. And, this is a marathon of running a business. It's not a sprint. Make sure you're taking care of yourself because people depend on you, both your family and your employees. So everybody have a great day. It's a good podcast today. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, Stephen.
You're welcome.